If you ever find this campground, leave before sunset. I've never told this story before, and there's a reason for that. The campground has a name, but I'm not going to say it. People who know about places like that believe speaking the name is an invitation, and after everything that happened, I'm not willing to test whether they're right. Call me paranoid if you want. I used to laugh at warnings like that too. Every year, thousands of people disappear inside America's national parks. Most are eventually found, confused, injured, or simply lost. Some are never seen again. Rangers blame rough terrain, bad weather, wild animals, or human error. I believed those explanations until I spent one night somewhere that shouldn't exist. Now I think I understand why a few names are never crossed off those missing person lists. So listen carefully. If you've ever driven past a campground in the middle of summer and every campsite was empty, every picnic table untouched, every fire pit cold, don't stop. Keep driving. Don't even look back. I ignored every warning anyone gave me. It was the worst mistake of my life. There are things I still refuse to tell because I don't know what happens if someone repeats them. Maybe that's fear talking. Maybe it's experience. Either way, you're probably wondering what could scare someone into hiding a simple camping trip for years. It started with one night in America's most haunted campground. It started with a road that shouldn't have existed. Nobody wanted me to go there. I've always been obsessed with abandoned places. Ghost towns, condemned hospitals, forgotten highways. If people avoided somewhere because of rumors instead of reason, I wanted to see it for myself. Most of the time, the stories fell apart under daylight. Rotting buildings creaked. Wind sounded like whispers. Fear filled in the blanks. I convinced myself every legend had a logical explanation waiting to be uncovered. Then I found scattered references to a campground that supposedly no longer existed. The first mention appeared in an old forum thread about strange locations inside American national parks. Someone claimed an entire campground had been removed from official maps after dozens of unexplained disappearances. The replies mocked the story until the original post vanished. Days later, the user's account disappeared too. I kept digging. Archived Reddit screenshots repeated the same warning. A scanned newspaper clipping mentioned 3 missing hikers, but cut off before naming the location. A retired park ranger abruptly ended an interview the moment a reporter asked about an abandoned campground hidden beyond an old service road. He stood up, walked away, and never agreed to another interview again. Every trail ended the same way. Deleted, archived, forgotten, or abandoned by the people who started asking questions. One comment refused to leave my mind. If the government removed it from the maps, what were they trying to hide? I couldn't stop thinking about it. A week later, I packed my camping gear and followed the scattered directions I'd pieced together from screenshots and faded documents. The highway gradually became cracked pavement, then gravel, then little more than 2 dirt tracks winding through dense forest. Hours passed. My GPS froze before displaying no signal. The radio dissolved into harsh static broken by brief fragments of voices I couldn't understand. The deeper I drove, the quieter everything became. No squirrels darted across the road. No deer watched from the trees. Eventually, even the birds stopped singing. The silence felt deliberate. Then I saw it. A weathered wooden sign leaned crooked beside the road. Whatever name had once been carved into it had been violently scratched away. Only 2 faded words remained. Welcome back. I laughed nervously. I'd never been there before. At least, I didn't think I had. Beyond the sign sat dozens of campsites arranged in neat rows beneath towering pines. Every picnic table was empty. Every fire pit was cold. Except one. A thin column of fresh smoke curled lazily into the evening sky. No voices. No tents. No people. Just a fire that someone, or something, had left burning. On the campground map stood a faded information board, and nailed to its center was a single folded piece of paper waiting for me. Someone wanted me to survive. The folded paper was yellow with age, its corners curled from years of rain and sunlight. At first glance, I assumed it was exactly what you'd expect to find in any campground: a list of park regulations. Keep food stored properly. Extinguish campfires. Respect wildlife. The usual stuff. Instead, I found 7 handwritten rules, written in uneven black ink that looked as though several different people had added to the page over many years. Across the top, someone had scrawled 3 words: "If you're alone." Below that, the rules began. Rule 1, never whistle. Rule 2, never answer if someone calls your name after sunset, even if it's someone you know. Rule 3, ignore the sound of children laughing. There are no children here. Rule 4, if another camper asks to share your fire, refuse politely. Do not explain why. Rule 5, never count the tents after dark. Rule 6, if you wake up outside your tent, keep your eyes closed and pretend you're still asleep. Rule 7, if someone wearing an old ranger uniform approaches you, don't let him finish speaking. Leave immediately. I stared at the page for several seconds before laughing to myself. Seriously? It felt like something ripped straight from an internet creepypasta forum. The kind of fake survival guide teenagers wrote for fun. Whoever managed this abandoned campground clearly had an odd sense of humor. Still, the handwriting bothered me. Each rule looked as though it had been written by a different person. Different pens, different pressure, different styles. Almost like every survivor had added one thing before leaving. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket anyway. Even fake stories made interesting souvenirs. As I explored the campground, the strange details multiplied. An old ranger station stood near the entrance, its windows shattered and its roof sagging beneath years of neglect. Deep claw marks scored the wooden walls, too high off the ground for any animal I recognized. They weren't random scratches either. They ran in perfectly parallel lines, as though something enormous had calmly dragged its hand across the building. Inside, dusty filing cabinets lay overturned. Maps covered one wall. Most had entire sections cut away with knives. Near the back, I found a faded missing person board. Dozens of photographs remained pinned beneath cracked plastic. Families, couples, solo hikers, children smiling beside campfires. Someone had drawn small red X's across several faces. Others had simply vanished, leaving only rusty thumbtacks behind. Then I noticed one photograph that stole the air from my lungs. A young boy stood beside a picnic table, smiling awkwardly at the camera. He couldn't have been older than 8. He looked exactly like me. Same dark hair, same crooked grin, even the faded blue jacket I remembered wearing as a kid. I reached toward the picture before stopping myself. That wasn't possible. I'd never been here. My parents had never taken me camping. At least, I didn't think they had. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I stepped outside, forcing myself to laugh again. Guess whoever made this place really committed to the bit. The joke sounded hollow. The forest answered with silence. The sun drifted lower behind the pines, painting everything in deep orange shadows. I pulled the paper back out, hoping another look would make the rules seem ridiculous again. Instead, I noticed something I'd missed. Between rules 6 and 7, there had once been another entry. Someone had scratched it out so violently that the paper had nearly torn apart. Not crossed out, destroyed. I held it toward the fading light, trying to read even a single word beneath the ink. Nothing. Whatever had been written there, someone desperately wanted forgotten. To this day, I still wish I'd known what that missing rule said. Maybe everything that happened afterward could have been avoided. Trying to shake off the growing unease, I stuffed the paper into my pocket and looked toward the trees. Seriously, I pursed my lips and gave a short, playful whistle. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a whistle answered. From somewhere deep in the forest. Another followed. Closer. Then a third echoed directly behind me. The laughter disappeared from my face. Night fell, and everything changed. It doesn't hunt during the day. Darkness didn't arrive all at once. It spread through the campground like ink soaking into paper. The last strip of orange disappeared beyond the trees, and the temperature dropped so quickly I could see my breath. The silence I'd noticed on the drive-in returned, only now it felt crowded, as though countless unseen things were holding their breath with me. Then every cold fire pit burst to life. One after another. No sparks. No hands. Just flames. Orange light rippled across dozens of empty campsites until the entire campground glowed as if invisible families had returned from a long hike. Shadows stretched between the trees, twisting with every flicker. I stood frozen. The fire I'd seen earlier was no longer unique. Every campsite had one. A zipper rasped through the darkness. Another answered. Then another. I turned slowly. Empty tents were unzipping themselves. The flaps opened only a few inches, just enough to reveal darkness inside. None of them moved again. Footsteps began circling my own campsite. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Never hurried. Never stopping. Always just beyond the reach of the firelight. I couldn't see whoever was making them. Then came laughter. Children. Not one child. Several. The sound drifted between the trees with the carefree joy of kids chasing one another through a summer campground. It was followed by adults chatting, someone flipping burgers over a grill, a mother calling everyone to dinner, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. The campground sounded completely alive, but every campsite remained empty. The contrast made my skin crawl. I could hear ordinary life unfolding all around me while staring at abandoned picnic tables and vacant chairs. The sounds belonged to a campground that wasn't there. Something moved across the road. A man. He wore an old ranger uniform faded almost gray with age. His campaign hat sat crooked on his head, and his boots made no sound despite the gravel beneath them. I tried to focus on his face. I couldn't. Every time I looked directly at it, my eyes slipped away as though refusing to recognize what they saw. He stopped just outside the circle of firelight. You stayed too long. His voice sounded tired. Not threatening. Resigned. What? You stayed too long. The exact same words. Same tone. Not repeated. Replayed. I remembered the paper. Rule 7. Don't let him finish speaking. I turned and ran before he could say anything else. The campground didn't look the same anymore. Rows of campsites stretched in directions I could have sworn hadn't existed earlier. New roads branched into the forest. Firelight flickered everywhere. One campsite held a cast iron pan over glowing coals. Bacon still sizzled inside, filling the air with the smell of breakfast. Another had fresh coffee steaming beside 2 untouched mugs. A sleeping bag still held the shape of whoever had just climbed out of it. Except nobody was there. I stumbled into another clearing where a small camcorder rested on a picnic table. The battery indicator still glowed. Against every instinct, I pressed play. The recording showed a young couple laughing while pitching their tent. The date stamp was nearly 15 years old. They joked about strange stories they'd read online. The woman laughed at a handwritten list of rules. The man whistled. The footage skipped. Night. Panic. The camera shook violently. Someone screamed. Then the picture steadied. The couple stared toward the lens with terrified expressions. Behind them stood someone watching. Me. I was standing perfectly still beneath the trees, wearing the same clothes I had on now. The recording ended. I dropped the camera. No. My voice sounded small. Impossible. I hadn't even known this place existed until a week ago. An owl screamed somewhere overhead. 5 minutes later, it screamed again. Exactly the same. Same pitch. Same rhythm. Like a recording. I looked up. The moon hadn't moved. I checked my watch. 12:13. Several minutes later, it still read 12:13. I hurried back toward the campground entrance, desperate for the map I'd seen earlier. When I reached it, my stomach tightened. The map had changed. Roads had shifted. Entire loops of campsites appeared where blank forest had been before. One section was marked with black ink, closed by order of the Park Service. Below it were faded references to incident reports, missing employees, and campsites permanently erased from official records. Someone had tried to hide this place. Not because it was abandoned, because it wasn't. A realization settled over me like ice. The worst thing in those woods wasn't whatever had been circling my fire. It was whatever had frightened that. Then, in the corner of the map, I noticed a hand-drawn trail leading somewhere no official path should have gone. At its end was a single label. Campsite 13. Nobody leaves the same person. The trail to Campsite 13 wasn't marked by a sign. It simply drifted away from the rest of the campground, swallowed by trees that seemed older than the forest around them. Pine needles muffled every footstep, and the deeper I walked, the quieter the world became until I could hear only my own breathing. The clearing appeared without warning. It was smaller than the other campsites, almost hidden beneath enormous trees whose branches locked together overhead. An ancient stone fire pit sat in the center, blackened by countless fires that looked far older than the campground itself. Around it stood weather-beaten canvas tents collapsing under their own age beside bright, modern backpacks that couldn't have been there for more than a few days. Children's toys lay scattered across the ground. A faded red truck, a cracked teddy bear, a tiny plastic flashlight. Everything looked abandoned. Everything looked recently used. The dirt surrounding the fire pit was covered with footprints. Large ones, small ones, boots, bare feet, dozens of overlapping tracks leading toward the woods. None coming back. I wanted to leave. Instead, I noticed a leather-bound journal tucked beneath one of the backpacks. The first pages were filled by different people, different handwriting, different dates stretching across decades. Each entry described the same impossible nights, the same laughter, the same ranger, the same rules. Then the entries changed. We kept waiting to find the bodies. There aren't any. That's because the campground doesn't kill people. I turned the page with trembling hands. It replaces them. The sentence sat alone. The writer continued below it in frantic, uneven letters. Everyone leaves. Their families see them again. Their friends hug them. They laugh at old jokes and remember birthdays. But something else walks out of these woods wearing their face. A cold pressure settled behind my eyes. Without warning, memories surfaced. Not memories I recognized. A campfire. Someone laughing. A woman calling my name from across a clearing. A warm hand reaching for mine. Then another hand. Long. Pale. Stretching between the trees where no person should have been standing. I staggered backward. Those moments felt real. More real than my own childhood. Had I imagined my past? Or had something rewritten it? You've been coming here your whole life. The ranger's voice drifted through the clearing. I turned. He stood beyond the fire pit, his face still impossible to hold in focus. I don't remember. You remember enough. His words weren't cruel. They sounded almost sympathetic. The wind stirred the pages of the journal until they reached the end. The final sheet had been ripped out. Only jagged fibers remained where it had once been. Whoever removed it hadn't wanted anyone to know how the story ended, or how to stop it. I never found that missing page. Part of me still believes it contained the only way to escape. The eastern sky slowly brightened. As sunlight spilled through the trees, the ranger faded into the morning mist without taking a single step. The laughter disappeared. The footsteps stopped. The campground became ordinary again. I ran. I never looked back until I reached my truck. The road home was exactly where I remembered it. My GPS worked again. Birds sang. People smiled at roadside diners. Everything looked normal. I convinced myself I'd escaped. Or maybe that's exactly what whatever left Campsite 13 wanted me to believe. Months passed. Life slowly settled back into something that resembled ordinary. Until one morning, something impossible found me again. Maybe I never left. Life settled into something that looked normal. Mostly. I went back to work. I answered texts. I laughed when people asked why I hadn't gone camping again. I became very good at pretending nothing had happened. But little things refused to stay buried. Every camping advertisement I saw featured the same line of pine trees. Friends kept recommending a beautiful hidden campground they swore I'd love, though none of them could remember exactly where they'd heard about it. Twice, my GPS rerouted me toward a road I knew I hadn't selected. Both times I turned around before the signal disappeared. Then I started noticing the photographs. At first it was only one. An old vacation picture. Someone stood between the trees behind me, out of focus, watching. A week later, another stranger appeared in a different photo. Then another. Each one stood a little closer. None of them had been there when the pictures were taken. Yesterday morning, an email arrived. No sender. No signature. Only a subject line. Welcome back. Attached was a reservation confirmation. One guest. Campsite 13. Check-in, tomorrow. I never made that reservation. Or maybe, something wearing my name did. So if you've ever driven past a campground with one empty fire still burning long after everyone else is gone, tell me where. I need to know if there are more. And if you've ever noticed the same faded ranger symbol from another one of these cases, mention that too. Maybe the stories are connected in ways we haven't understood yet. The final rule was missing from the journal. I've spent every day since wondering whether breaking it is the reason no one ever truly leaves. If you have your own unexplained camping story or strange encounter in the woods, share it below. I read every one. Maybe together we can solve case number 4. Or maybe that's exactly what it wants. Save Campsite 13 for me.